Hello, friends, and welcome back to r/ProRevenge. We begin our video with the story of the beggar sister who tried to scam her own brother. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you're new here and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. Here we go. SIL wants money to buy deceased grandpa's land. 2 years ago, my husband's grandfather passed away from cancer. He was in his 90s and lived life to the fullest, so he opted to not have treatment. A week after, my husband received a voicemail from his sister asking him to call her. They don't have the greatest relationship, so he didn't answer at first, but he started thinking that she was calling to offer her condolences. Wrong. She was calling because she wanted my husband to invest money into buying the land that their grandfather had owned in Hawaii. Before he passed, Grandpa had stopped paying taxes on this land due to not having the money, and it was being repossessed. Sister-in-law wanted my husband to front thousands of dollars so that all of the grandchildren would have something from their grandfather. Sister-in-law's house had already been foreclosed on, and she'd filed for bankruptcy due to living beyond her means, so she wouldn't be paying anything, but she expected to be included in this venture. My husband called his dad, father-in-law, the oldest of all of Grandpa's children, and asked him what was going on. Apparently, sister-in-law and another cousin wanted the land in Hawaii because it's very valuable. They wanted my husband to pay the back taxes and to make all the payments so they could brag about having property in Hawaii. Father-in-law was annoyed by the whole thing because to even try to get the land back would be a huge pain in the butt. Grandpa had a wife that had basically spent all of his money, causing him to die almost penniless. To even try to fight for this land, they'd have to go to court against her. Father-in-law also believed that the land was cursed and wanted nothing to do with it, and he advised my husband to stay far away from it. My husband told sister-in-law that he's not interested in the land and that the only reason he answered her call was because he thought she wanted to express her condolences about my dad. Sister-in-law shrieked about how ungrateful my husband is, how she was including him in this idea to get land that rightfully belongs in the family. She also went on about how we don't deserve any comfort or condolences because we're selfish capitalists that only think about ourselves. Sister-in-law screamed at my husband, stating that she's going to tell their mom about what an a-hole he's being to her and that she won't ever include him in anything again. My husband told her that was fine with him since she only calls when she wants something. Sister-in-law screamed more profanities, then hung up. My husband called his dad again to let him know what happened, and father-in-law told him he made the right decision. The land was foreclosed on and sold. Unfortunately, I don't know for how much. Sister-in-law badmouthed us to the family about how we're greedy and selfish, but we haven't heard anything from her for a few years now, and we prefer it that way. She sounds like she needs some serious therapy. I see why your husband has a distant relationship with her. And our second story. Told you so. About 15 years ago, I was going to be just on time to the little tech store I worked at and was moving from one freeway to another on one of those little single-lane overpasses that had nowhere to veer off to in case a car ahead of you stopped. And sure enough, there was a gold minivan ahead that had just stopped hard in front of me. As a previous car crash survivor, I drive much more alert and have trained up for these sorts of events, however, so I braked, swerved a little back and forth, and ended up only scraping the underside of their bumper with mine. I didn't even move the minivan half an inch with mine. It was about 9:40 a.m. on a Thursday morning, so traffic was less hectic and no one else hit us. I got out to see if I'd actually hit them and could see nothing and looked in the van to see who was driving. I saw 2 ETs and 4 kids all bouncing around in the van. No one was strapped in, and the ETs were both on cell phones. They got out and started shouting at me that I had hit them, and they were calling the highway patrol. I said I didn't see any damage and nothing had happened, and if they were smart, they'd count themselves lucky and move on quickly. But they refused, saying how I was going to have to pay for damages, and after 10 minutes of searching for something, they found a black rub-off spot of rubber underneath their rear bumper. They claimed I did, and it was going to cost me $500 cash, or they were calling and hitting my insurance. I said to them that it was nothing and not even provable, but they can do what they want. I repeated my warning about not to call the highway patrol and move on if they were smart. The ETs refused and called saying I'd hit them and damaged their moms, this is going to be bad for them, LOL, new van, and they wanted to report and to have me ticketed. So I waited with them, as I couldn't go anywhere without them moving as it was, and just stayed quiet. About an hour and a half or so later, a highway patrolman showed up and cleared the traffic behind us and instructed us both to exit at the next exit and pull into a convenience store to sort it all out. I swore I knew the patrol officer as we did this, and I was right. Also, I was very cooperative and polite to the officer at all times. That always pays off, if nothing else. Remember that. At the little store, the patrol officer asked my details, did the paperwork, and said he was ticketing me and I had to wait. He had some questions I had to answer and papers to sign. Another 40 minutes waiting, trying to figure out why he looked so familiar to me, and the ETs left staring the most evil hate daggers and flipped me off as they drove off in a huff with a pound of tickets in hand. Details to follow. The officer asked me what happened, gave me my ticket, and said they were at fault in truth, but I did scrape the bumper but had to go to court and the judge would dismiss the charges after seeing the report and hearing my story. I said sure. He then mentioned my old job, and that was where I knew him. We had worked together a few years back as correctional officers before moving on to better careers. We talked old times, joked, and remembered shared acquaintances. He also mentioned, did you warn them to leave and not call on this? I said yes, and he laughed, saying, you were so right. And I said, let me guess, reckless driving, 4 minor children without safety seats, they had none in the van for 4 kids under the age of 4, and creating a hazard. He said, and driving without insurance and on a permit only. Wow, that's going to cost them about $5,500 in fines if they get the minimums. That explains the kill me looks they gave me. We both laughed and went about our days. Follow-up, I went to court as advised and asked for a dismissal from the judge, which he granted after getting the facts and the 2 ETs not showing up to contest even. He did not have to issue tickets at his choice. We both learned something that day. And just for fun, I left the court feeling good, and when I got to my vehicle, I had a parking ticket waiting for an expired meter. Missed it by 2 minutes. Wouldn't be life if you own everything. I bet you're glad you bumped into the officer, right? Also, 2 teenagers, both on their phones? What'd they think was going to happen? And our last story. Maybe next time you'll ask permission. I didn't do this, my dad did. Grew up on a farm near a lake. The lake was a pretty good location for waterfowl hunting, and my family owns most of the property along the eastern 1/3 of the lake. Most hunters were pretty good about asking either of my parents or one of my uncles who lives nearby if it was okay for them to access the lake by going through our property, and they were pretty chill about it, only requesting they didn't leave a mess. Except for this one pair of hunters. They skipped over a couple steps that Sunday morning and went straight to parking their big fancy truck in one of our field drives before heading out to the lake to go shoot ducks. Dad found their truck and tried to find them, but no luck. He came back to the tractor he'd been driving, took note of their license plate, and suddenly changed his mind about plans for the day. He pulled out of the drive, backed into it, then dropped off the rather large chisel plow just inches away from the fancy truck's back bumper, and headed back home, where he told my mom what happened and that he was going to be unavailable for a time. The morning goes by uneventfully until about 11 a.m. when my uncle, who lived the closest to this field drive and knew what was going on, got a knock on the door. It was those 2 hunters, and they were mad. You see, the drive they'd parked in was a dead-end drive, and with the plow blocking the only outlet, they had no way of getting out unless they wanted to drive through the ready-to-harvest cornfield or go through the pasture fence. Big no-no either way. They rudely asked if my uncle could move the plow so they could leave and get home in time to watch the big game against our football team's big rival. Uncle replied he couldn't since it wasn't his equipment, technically, but he'd try to contact the owner. He told them after that he couldn't and shut the door. We got the call at our house and we relayed the message to my dad, who was outside doing busy work on our farm. He got this crap-eating little grin on his face. Oh, really? They can wait, and went back to doing his busy work. Lunchtime rolled around, and Dad still hadn't bothered to go out to where he dropped off his plow. He even relaxed a little bit afterwards, enjoying the game. Meanwhile, the 2 hunters are losing it. It was the early 90s, before cell phones became widely available, so they were demanding to be let into my uncle's house so they could use his phone to call the county sheriff and get people arrested and junk. Uncle, paraphrasing here, you're clearly not from around here. If you were, you'd know that you should have asked permission to use anyone's property. They interrupted and insisted they had asked. Uncle, like I said, if you'd asked permission to use our property, my brother would have had no problem. Busted with you doing that. And since you're on our property without permission, do you seriously think the sheriff would be on your side? They said they'd go to any of our neighbors with their sob story and get help that way. Uncle, good luck with that. We've contacted everybody in the area and they aren't going to help you. He never bothered to point out that my folks' place was less than a mile up the road. You probably aren't going to be able to hunt here next year either, since we remember this sort of thing. You can sit and wait and think about how to avoid this sort of thing in the future. And then shut the door in their faces one last time and left them to pout in their truck. Dad made them wait until 5 p.m., so he had to sit and stew all day before he decided it was time to fire up the big red tractor again. He headed over, but before he hitched up the plow, he asked if the two had learned their lesson. Pretty sure they were originally going to get all self-righteous on him, and although my dad is just 6 feet tall and kind of lean, he just oozes this do not F with me aura when he's mad, so they simply said yes and got the hell out of there once the plow was moved. We're pretty sure they missed the game by the time they got home and were stuck with listening to it on the radio. They not only went without asking permission, but went ahead and parked their truck in one of the drives leading to the field, clearly on the farm property. That sounds like they were just asking for trouble. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.